Hello, I'm Francis Stark. I'm the archivist historian for the American Society for Horticultural Science. One of the programs we have underway right now is trying to interview some of the outstanding horticulturists of the late 20th century and some of those who were movers and shakers. One of those I have with me today is Dr. James Moore, who was president of the Society in 1987-88. He has been a breeder and done considerable research with fruits and spent his whole career right here in Arkansas. I'm in Fayetteville today and in his home as we conduct this interview. And it's just an awful pleasure to be able to do this, Jim. So, Dr. Moore, would you tell us a little bit about where you grew up and where you went to school, up through your bachelor's degree, and how did you get interested in horticulture?
Thank you, Francis. I grew up in central Arkansas near a small town called Plummerville, and grew up on a small farm there. Went to Plummerville all through high school, and then after graduation from high school, I started college at a junior for agriculture at least, Arkansas Tech University, which was about 30 miles from my hometown. And went through the first 2 years there, and then that was the beginning of the Korean War. I dropped out of school, spent 3 years in the U.S. Air Force, came back and did my last 2 years of undergraduate work at the University of Arkansas. As far as getting interested in horticulture, when I look back, I think I really developed an interest in horticulture in my very early years. I grew up on a small farm, and our major cash crops were cotton and cattle, neither of which appealed to me. But I did enjoy working in the family fruit and vegetable garden, so I had an interest in horticulture at that time. But I really decided on horticulture as a career after I came to the University of Arkansas in my last 2 undergraduate years. I worked part-time in the horticulture department. I got to know the faculty. I developed a great respect for the faculty. I got interested in their programs, and I decided horticulture looked like a pretty good career field. So from that point on, I was a horticulturist.
Who was your advisor during your undergraduate days?
Well, actually, when I started as an undergraduate, I was majoring in vocational agricultural education because I'd been influenced to go to college by my vocational agriculture teacher in high school. And I thought that would be a good career, and I started out that way. And then, so I was advised by vocational education people. But after I got into my junior and senior year, I'd already decided to change majors. So I finished up. I was certified to teach, but even at the time, I knew I was going to be a horticulturist.
Yeah, was John Bowers or who did your advising in horticulture?
In horticulture,
yeah.
As I say, I was advised in my undergraduate program by
I see you.
a man by the name of Dr. Atherton advised.
Okay.
But I
didn't have a horticulture.
I got a lot of unofficial advice from the horticulture faculty. Dr. Catan, Dr. McFerrin, Dr. Bowers.
Well, then, who was the mover that got you into graduate school?
Well,
why did you do that?
Yeah, that was Dr. Ahmed Catan, who was Fairly new here, young man, young professor, very full of ideas and enthusiasm, and he kind of took me under his wing and, and began to encourage me to go to graduate school. At the time, I had no thought of graduate school, but Dr. Catan said, you really ought to get a master's, and I'm very proud today to say that I was his first graduate student at the University of Arkansas. So he was really the person that got me into graduate school and the master's program.
And you did a master's degree here.
Did a master's degree here at
And
Arkansas.
what was your thesis?
Thesis was on the effect of irrigation, spacing, and fertility on the yield and quality of processing tomatoes.
Tomatoes.
Tomatoes, yes.
Now then, but you didn't stop at the master's. You went on for a doctorate.
Yes, I was, about the time I finished my master's, the university asked me to, they kept me on as an instructor for a short while, but I'd already decided I wanted to get a PhD, and I found out there was an opening at Rutgers University for research associate in the fruit breeding area under Dr. Fred Huff. And I called him up, and he hired me over the telephone, and I left right away and drove up to Rutgers and started my PhD program there.
Okay.
I think, Francis, I would say I was very fortunate in my career to have two outstanding advisors, both of whom not only taught me a lot of things, but I think more importantly conveyed to me the enthusiasm for doing horticultural research, and I'm very, very happy with that.
Now, was this where you got interested in genetics and breeding?
Yes, it was. Under Dr. Huff, who was one of the world's leading fruit breeders.
He was indeed, yes. Well, while we're on this, I was going to ask you if you could tell us a little bit about Fred. I won't have a chance to interview him, of course. He passed on some years ago.
Fred, of course, was a great fruit breeder, and one of the things perhaps he didn't get enough credit for was his advising and training of graduate students, because now if you look around the world at some of the leaders in the international fruit breeding community today, a lot of them were Fred Huff students, and they got good training from Fred, and again that enthusiasm for developing new fruit cultivars. He was an outstanding person, a real pleasure to work with. He gave his graduate students a lot of latitude, allowed them to make their own mistakes, and then he would help us out of the problem after we made the mistakes.
What was your dissertation on?
My dissertation was on the effect of gamma irradiation and photoperiod on the vegetative and reproductive growth of the strawberry. Actually, it was good training. Most of my research work was done at Brookhaven National Laboratory in Long Island, and that was a good experience. So I enjoyed the program, although it wasn't strictly a plant breeding project.
Yeah. Well, that's right.
I did use what I've learned there later, I guess. During my career, I used gamma radiation as a mutagen on several fruit crops.
So what do you do now when you finished your doctorate?
When I finished my doctorate, I was approached by Dr. Don Scott at the USD at Beltsville, small fruit program, to come there as a research horticulturist, which I accepted, and went into the program there, primarily responsible for blueberry and grape breeding with the USDA. I stayed there 3 years and was very happy with it's a great research facility, as you well know, and I was very happy there, but I got a call that the University of Arkansas was looking for a fruit breeder to start a fruit breeding program here in Arkansas. And there were a couple of reasons that I chose to accept. It was a hard decision for me at the time, but one of the reasons, this is in addition to the fact that I was coming home, but one of the reasons was that I would be be allowed to start from scratch my own fruit breeding program, which appealed to me. To start out at the bottom and build a program.
You're not just taking over somebody else's
That's
program.
right. It wasn't just taking over somebody else's
I
program.
see. Yeah.
And the other thing that really attracted me was that I would have the opportunity to teach and to direct graduate students, which is something I'd always wanted to do, and I saw the possibilities, of course, in a federal research program as not having those options. So I was able to do that too.
You have done a lot of teaching, I think.
I've done a lot of teaching. I taught for 30 years. I taught 2 courses in horticulture. One was small fruit culture, which is an undergraduate course, and the other was advanced plant breeding, which was a graduate course for all plant breeders in all departments at the University of Arkansas. And really enjoyed teaching, and particularly the advanced plant breeding, because I was dealing with graduate students totally, mature people who knew what they wanted to do with their lives, their careers, and I always enjoyed working with graduate students. In fact, I guess in my career I was able to direct the programs of 11 PhDs and 20 master's students. I was on the committees of probably somewhere around 75 additional students in other areas.
Now you started a new program when you went to Arkansas. You went there as an associate professor, I think.
Yeah.
Soon became a full professor, and of course you're teaching and your research effort. You are now a distinguished professor.
Yes, sir.
I congratulate you for that.
Thank you.
But what were your research efforts on all these years at Arkansas? You were breeding something.
Yeah. Well, I started out. The program was to breed strawberries and grapes and blackberries. Those were the 3 crops that I was hired to do. And I started those programs when I came in 1964. And then about 2 years later, I joined forces with a pomologist, fruit man here, Dr. Roy Roan, and we started an apple and peach breeding program. Then, in the meantime, I was doing research on establishing blueberries as a new crop in this region of the country. There were no blueberries at the time. And I did the research to show they could be grown, and we had an industry that had begun to develop. And then I decided to start a blueberry breeding program. So we added that on in the late 60s. So I wound up with a lot of different crops.
Well, what's the developments now out of your breeding program?
Well, I think the thing that most people recognize, I think the thing that's brought the greatest fame to our program has been the what's become known as the Indian Tribe series of blackberries, where we've released now 10 different cultivars of blackberry, all with Indian Tribe names. And one of the developments was the world's first erect growing thornless blackberry. It doesn't have to be trellised, and those have been really well accepted not only in this country but also in other countries of the world. And so we're now recognized, I think, as the leading blackberry breeding program in the world. Also, with table grapes, we've some of the developments like the Rice and Mars and Venus, again a series in this case named after planets, and those have been well accepted too in the country. And we've released a couple of varieties of processing peaches, 1 apple, 4 ornamental peaches, recently 1 blueberry, and a couple more seedless grapes. So there's been something over 30 different cultivars of all the different crops.
Have you done any work in foreign countries?
I've never had the opportunity to take a sabbatical and really spend a lot of time. And the reason is I was one deep here in fruit breeding, and you can't afford to miss a season when you're a fruit breeder. So I never could take the time. But I have gone on several short short, I mean 3-week to 8-week
Consultants.
trips. Some consultancies, some several of these were sponsored by the U.S. National Academy of Sciences, their science exchange program. And so I've worked in Bulgaria, and Romania, and Poland, Ireland, Mexico, Brazil, several trips to Brazil, and among the countries that I've worked in. So,
But those that invited you there, was that because of your reading program here?
I think yes, yeah, it was. It was. They were.
That trying to tell them how to do it, or
Well, trying to.
what your plan?
It was a mutual thing, you know. I would. I'm sure they wanted to find out how we did things, and I was interested in finding out, and we were interested in exchanging germplasm, so I could see what they had and make arrangements to make exchanges, which we've done some of, and help both programs in the country of ours too.
There was a man here. I remember his last name was Fleming.
Yeah, Joe Fleming.
Joe Fleming. Did you work with him? And yeah, though he had some grape work going of some kind.
I didn't work with Joe after I came back on the faculty, but interestingly, I worked for Joe when I was an undergraduate. I worked in the lab, washing glassware and things like that for Joe Fleming. Yeah, he was a good, he was a chemist.
Yeah, yes, that's right. Yeah. Was he also working on grapes?
Yeah, he was working on grape training and fertility,
yes.
particularly fertility, long-term studies on fertility of grapes.
Another person I know you knew, and wonder if you tell us a little bit about what you know. A few things about him. Was Norm Childers.
Norm Childers.
He hired
He hired me at Rutgers. He was the department head. I actually worked with, as I said, with Dr. Huff, but Dr. Childers was the department head, and originally from Missouri, so we kind of spoke the same language when I went there, and I got to know Dr. Childers real well. He was a great advisor too in his area of fruit nutrition, and certainly a great horticulturist. He's still active at a very advanced age now at the University of Florida as a teacher.
Yes. I've interviewed him. A lot of things have happened during your career in the horticultural industry, and probably this is, if we can call it that, the golden age of horticulture. Could we just enumerate some of the things that have taken place? For example, let me cite as an example. When I started working with tomatoes in Maryland, we were getting 3 tons to the acre, and by the time I retired, we were getting close to 20 tons to the acre. On a lot fewer acres, of course. But what would you say was some of the things that have happened during the time that you've been a horticulturist?
Well, I think we've seen in the fruit area yield increases, at least in some crops, similar to that. Strawberries is a good example, where back when I started, all strawberries were grown in the old matted row system, and the yields weren't very great, and they were very narrow in terms of harvest interval, 3 or 4 weeks in an area, and that was it. And now with new techniques of plasticulture and new genotypes, particularly coming out of the University of California program and now the University of Florida program, they've been able to expand that to where strawberry production can last almost year-round with extremely high yields, day-neutral cultivars, which we didn't have at the time I started. So that particular crop has been completely revolutionized during the time I've been here. And there are other crops too, new training systems in grapes that have increased the yields, the quality of fruit, as another example.
How about genetic improvement?
Genetic improvement, certainly. We look back if you look back, there's very few fruit crops, some apples, and of course Concord grape that were grown back at the time, and 50 or 40 years ago when I started out, that were still grown. But mainly the major cultivars have been completely changed, and new ones have come on that are better producers, more production, larger fruit size, better quality, better shipping ability. A lot of things that have happened. It's almost totally turned over.
I know that apples are not something you work with, but you've probably observed it, what's going on in the industry. And what the apple industry today doesn't look anything like it did 20 years ago.
No. No, the training systems combined with new genotypes, new cultivars, it is totally different. You don't see the very large trees anymore. They've gone almost totally to very close spacing, more dwarf type trees, easier to harvest, more production for a unit of land. It's all changed. People growing apples 50 years ago wouldn't recognize the industry today.
That's right. Let me ask you one to see if you can say what you want to, maybe you won't want to say anything, but one of the hot issues today is genetic manipulation, GMOs. Do you have anything that you want to make any off the cuff guesses on what's going to happen with this in years to come?
Well, from the standpoint of developing new genotypes of plants, as a conventional plant breeder, I guess I answer this question with some amount of bias, because I remember when this first started, genetic engineering, biotechnology, gene splicing, the prediction was that the old type of plant breeder would be obsolete in 10 years, and that hasn't happened, and is not likely to happen. But I think, I think there is a place for the new technology in plant breeding and plant improvement. I think when the conventional plant breeders and the biotechnologists finally start working together, and they are working together now in many places, I think we'll see some real positive changes in the cultivar situation in fruits and vegetables. But I don't think plant breeders, the conventional type of plant breeder, will ever be replaced, because if you look at it, biotechnology has the ability to insert individual genes or to move individual genes about from one species to the other. But a plant is made up of thousands and thousands of genes, and they have to act in concert, in accord with each other to produce the kind of product that the farmer has to have. Someone has to see that is done and what effect climate has on this, and so someone still has to go to the field and look at these individual plants and say, okay, this one is superior to this one. That's the people trained in the way I was trained that have to look at the whole plant situation. The other thing, for instance, in fruit crops, most of the important characteristics, such as yield and fruit size, and many of the quality characteristics, are not controlled by simple single genes. They're controlled by a multiple number of genes, which biotechnology has not been able to make this many changes at one time. So there still has to be a lot of old-fashioned hybridization and selection take place. But I do think that biotechnology has the ability to speed up plant breeding, because and to achieve things that conventional plant breeding never could. Like with all plants, there are barriers to hybridization between distant species. And biotechnology has perhaps the potential to overcome these barriers, to move genes from one alien species into another and develop entirely new kinds of plants, which which could never be done through the hybridization process.
What, do you have any feeling about what, well, about public acceptance of, of course, Europe and America are two different situations, I think. But public acceptance of some of these things, like putting a VT gene into a tomato, whatever.
Well, I personally have no problem. I would have no problem with using material. I think it's safe, but I can understand how some people might be reluctant to accept this kind of thing, and it's going to be a big hill to climb in this country, and more particularly in some of the European countries, to be able to market products that have been genetically modified. I was in Brazil recently, and they had a buyer, a large fruit buyer from England. They are trying to make contracts with growers to buy their peaches and apples in Brazil and ship them to England. And he made the statement that we will not accept anything that's genetically modified. So, you know, and I think that's eventually. I think people will learn to accept it. I think it's going to be a big hurdle.
Someday it's going to get sorted out.
Yeah, it'll get sorted out.
What's going to happen in Europe, of course, right now, I think is anybody's guess, but lots of things going on there.
Yeah, certainly.
A lot of changes have been going on during your lifetime and mine. And
certainly has been.
It certainly has been exciting, I think.
I think one of the, if we've got time to talk about another change, I think that it's in the ability to do research from the time I started until the new people coming into the system now. That's changed a lot too. When I started out, I think counting publications was not as big a deal as it is now. The reward system is different. I think the administrators, perhaps because it was smaller groups, I don't know, but administrators seem to know better what their faculty people were doing and seem to appreciate it more now. They have to have things like publications counted or all of our releases, and money was different. Again, we got, back when I started, we didn't always have the budget that we needed and wanted, but we didn't have to go out and get every dollar that we spent donated to the program, like many of the programs are now. So I think we had a little easier time back when I started out than the new people coming in.
There's been a lot of arguments about the merits of the formula funds versus the ones where you have to apply for it.
Yeah, well, I really, maybe because I came into the system, the formula funding was there, but I really like that system, because I think now when I see some of my young colleagues that are spending 20-30% of their time writing grants, time that I think they ought to be in the laboratory or in the field doing research, and they're out there searching for money, and I think it's a waste of good talent.
Right. Well, Jim, this has certainly been interesting, and sure appreciate this opportunity to
it's been
get this down on tape. And
it's been a great career for me. I'd recommend horticulture to anybody. I've certainly enjoyed my career in it, and a lot of positive things happened to me. I think and certainly being elected president of ASHS was one of the highlights of my career, and I'm very, very proud to have served ASHS, and I still.
By the way, I wanted to ask you, when did you first join ASHS?
I joined during my master's program in 1957.
Did somebody sort of encourage you to join, or did you say, hey, I ought to be a member?
My advisor, Dr. Todd, says you ought to join.
Yeah.
I've been a member ever since. Yes.
Well, Jim, good to talk with you.
Thank you very much.
Real pleasure. It's been a nice Glad to be in your house here.
Well, I'm very pleased to have you here, and it's been a pleasure to discuss, to relive some of my career experiences.